I want to go on and tell you a little bit more about what these teachers had to say, because it's not just that they want to rant and rave and call America names. They have very, very specific targeted demands about America. And this is what these, again, Los Angeles teachers unions, their formal statement, this is what they're saying will be necessary in order to have America come back. They spend much of their document talking about vulnerable populations, about African American students, students with disabilities, students of color. They have a new, or at least new to me, acronym, which is BIPOC, B-I-P-O-C, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. And so they talk a lot in this document about the BIPOC segment of their students, as well as those who are disabled. And you would think these people lived in some third world, starving nation. When you're finished reading how these people, these teachers and the teachers union write about those students, think about them, think about their families, you would think these students live in some literally remote third world starving country instead of the United States of America. So they launch forward basically with their demands related to what is needed before we can open, premised on this whole BIPOC and all of the disadvantages that people, they describe people of color suffer in our country. And so they talk about the idea of having many more resources and having them safely and equitably divided. But I just want to go through some of the demands they make, because I don't want to just tell you labels like they're extreme and radical and Marxist. I'm going to tell you what they're actually saying. So this is the teachers union saying, before we can come back safely, and they're literally going to hold school opening hostage, you understand, until they at least get to negotiate some of these. And probably they would say, until we get them, we need all the above, and we're not opening school, we're not coming to work. And so some of the things they are demanding: paid sick leave for all parents in the Los Angeles school district, so they can keep their symptomatic children home. They want contact tracing, intense contact tracing throughout the entire Los Angeles Unified School District. They have a big emphasis on hygiene. This is good, wash hands, all those kind of things. But they go on way, way, way past, health conditions and things like contact tracing, which itself is an onerous intrusion and many families do not want it. But they go beyond that. They'd want explicit plans in place to deal with the social, emotional trauma and continued stress amidst the panic, including increased mental health supports, including increased staffing of counselors, psychologists, social workers, all private physician assistants. They want to have special teams to come in the school district just to deal with the trauma of the pandemic. And they're saying they're taking language from the CDC to implement even a portion of the COVID-19 best practices out of the CDC, requires additional funding. So they're saying best practices, CDC puts out best practices, means like in the perfect world. You would do everything, if you had the perfect world, you would do this. So they have estimates that the average school district would need to spend an additional $1.8 million to safely reopen schools under the best practices. Extrapolating the CDC's numbers to the size of the Los Angeles Unified School District, they're saying they need about $250 million more. This isn't even the worst of it. Let me now go through with you the demands they're making in order to safely open Los Angeles Unified School District. They want they're talking about, experts saying we need at least $500 billion, B as in boy, billion, as a federal bailout. This is on top of all the money that the federal government has already allotted in the CARES Act. We talked about that. This is money coming out of Washington, going to families suffering in some way, largely because of loss of employment or being furloughed, or in some other way having financial challenges based on the pandemic, the virus. And so they have the federal bailout they're saying under CARES and HEROES wasn't nearly enough. Those are the two federal acts, CARES and HEROES. They want more funding for K through 12 in the realm of, and they're saying for their school district alone, nearly $1 billion, B as in boy, billion, nationwide, $500 billion at least, more bailout money just to go to families. This isn't even about coming to the schools. This is just to the families who suffered under the virus. They want to have Medicare for all. Not kidding. This is a demand of the Los Angeles Unified School District, the teachers union, telling Washington, because we had a virus, Medicare for all must pass. Medicare for all, everybody gets free health care, just like Medicare, free for everybody, health care for all. I mean, just crazy level. They make repeated reference to the increase, the higher percentage of people in the black community who are succumbing to, either susceptible to or succumbing to the virus, and they point to that as a reason that they have an inordinately high or a higher than the national average percentage of students in the Los Angeles Unified School District who are either black, Hispanic, or other person of color, and because of that percentage, they need a lot of money from the government, and they're under the federal bailout money, and they need Medicare for all, and so they're demanding Medicare for all pass. They also want to have, they're telling the state of California must pass a wealth tax, a new tax on unrealized capital gains to California billionaires only, 1% a year until capital gains taxes are met. They want a millionaire tax, so they want a billionaire tax and a millionaire tax imposed by the state of California, all so that they can go back to school safely. They want all this money collected. They demand, as far as local support, defunding the police. So this is the teachers union on board defunding the police, and they're talking about police violence as a leading cause of death and trauma for black people, a serious public health issue. Therefore, all police must be defunded. They go on to demand housing security. They want California to pass the idea that Governor Newsom, we played his State of the State speech, I guess in January this year, and he floated the idea that housing must be considered a human right. Housing, guaranteed housing is a human right, kind of like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, freedom of speech, a right to housing. And so the government has a duty, therefore, to provide for that right. For everyone doesn't have housing, they're saying, yeah, state of California has to agree housing is a right, and therefore we're insisting, because, and they always go back in this lengthy document, extrapolate back to the point that this was a massive pandemic. We don't know if it's going to happen again. We have a very large school system. We have a higher than average percentage of students in the school system, Los Angeles Unified School District, who are BIPOC was their term, the acronym I mentioned a moment ago. And so therefore, and some of them, there's a higher level of housing insecurity. So therefore, the state must pass housing security for all. So everybody gets a free house or gets house provided by the government. They want a moratorium on charter schools. Of course they do, because charter schools provide competition to the public schools governed by these teachers unions. The teachers unions have long hated the charter schools because they provide competition, because they are actually paid for by taxes and they're public schools, except they're not controlled by the teachers unions, drives the teachers unions nuts. So in order to come back in the fall, and by the way, fall for their school district means August 18th, would have normally been the opening day. So as of August 18th, they want all of this, including charter moratorium in all charter schools, and increased financial support for undocumented students and families. So you see, because there's a virus, Los Angeles should get more money for illegal aliens, for undocumented students and their families, demanding, they got numbers here, billions and billions of dollars, not enough, not nearly enough to provide for all the needs of undocumented aliens. So they actually at least have the integrity to say, and they're closing out this document, is, we didn't like things before, and their expression was, normal wasn't working for us before, we can't go back. They are, my very fine friends, proposing a very Marxist, socialist, collectivist controlled school system in Los Angeles. They are teachers unions. They are the big teachers union in Los Angeles. And they're saying all of this, Medicare for all, free housing for all, more money for illegal aliens, all of that is needed, don't you know, in order to open schools after the COVID crisis forced the closing of schools this year, this academic year in March or so. I'm not sure when they close in California. But I want to tell you one of the reasons I'm talking about in this show today. Obviously, to any sane person, obviously to any person realistic about finances, realistic about the fact that California is already broke, because California promises free everything to everybody. They can't raise the taxes sufficient to pay for all the crazy they think up. But people recognize that's California. They're kind of, they're way out there in the radical left. They're already socialist. In fact, we lived there years ago. My husband and I lived there years ago. And even then, people were calling it, the Socialist Republic of California, because it's very, very socialist, Marxist mindset already. But what's astonishing and remarkable, and why I want to talk about in the show today, is these people are saying things, demanding things that are ludicrous to most of America, ludicrous on the American playing field, given all the challenges America faces, but they're not even slightly embarrassed. They're not saying, these might seem a little extreme, these might seem a little bit, past what we can afford, but here's our pipe dream. These are all written down as demands, as this is what we get. This is America, and we've gone so far left, we're going to demand free everything for everybody, and you're going to cough it up if you want to have our schools open. And I'm telling you that part of what's happened in this country over the last, it was 8 years under Obama, but even more so in the 3+ years under President Trump, you've had a growth in the, I'm not going to say in the size of the radical left in our country. Maybe you have the millennials who are kind of on board, but you have a growth in the stridency of the American left, of the Marxist anti-American left. Stridency, unapologetic. They have managed, or at least in their worldview, to mainstream, to legitimize radically leftist ideas. So these teachers, these people who would be at school teaching all the children in Los Angeles Unified School District that America is the worst place ever, it's a deeply racist society, it's an unfair society, that the entire problem is America itself. America should be drastically reformed into the Marxist vision they want, and they want to teach your kids, and they're not even a tiny bit, not even an iota. This is a little bit out there. They think this is the norm. And under the 3 years of President Trump, you've had the left because you had, unfortunately, you had the first avowed socialist candidate running for president in 2016, Bernie Sanders, continuing to try to mainstream un-American ideas, socialist ideas, mainstream them, grow the Democrat Socialists of America, push his ideas on young people who've gone through, sadly, decades of education in our country, being taught by idiots like these people in Los Angeles. And so you have legitimizing the normalization of radical leftist ideas. So these teachers, I don't even know if they're aware how their demands sound to mainstream heartland America. I think they don't even realize how far off field they are, how far off track they are. But this is the kind of thing coming out of Los Angeles Unified School District, and I'll close out this segment by saying this about that. I'm going to guess that under our current administration in Washington, there's not going to be capitulation to these kinds of ideas. I don't think that Betsy DeVos or President Trump or the entire education establishment is going to just salute and say, okay, if that's what it'll take, sure, Medicare for all, free housing for all, lots of money for illegal aliens, make everything free. And on top of that, I mean, the thing is so full of demands, I just scratched the surface in what I read to you. This will not be received well in Washington, will not be received well by Betsy DeVos or the education department or whoever runs the education department next, or by President Trump. But I want you to picture what will happen as early as next year if we have a President Biden sitting in the White House. Joe Biden is not the mainstream, milquetoast, moderate Democrat that his handlers are trying to tell you he is. We're going to do a segment about him a little later in the show, but I raise this in part to say we need to live in a country where the people in power recognize what the Los Angeles Unified School District Union, the Unified Teachers of LA, UTLA, we have to have a country where most of America and those in power can say, not a chance. We're not even negotiating this level of crazy with you. We'll negotiate hygiene protections. We'll negotiate how we're going to handle hand washing. I guess if we have to talk social distancing, we'll negotiate that. But we're not changing the entire structure of our country. We're not changing to Medicare for all, socialized medicine, government-controlled healthcare, collectivist healthcare. We're not guaranteeing free housing for all. We're not guaranteeing any of that. It's not, and we're not even going to negotiate with you. We need that form, that strength of leadership in Washington to say to these people, no, and that is the end. Not happening, not even talking to you about it. You're off the reservation. Here in America, here's what we do. We have this rules. We'll help out with people who are need special attention. In American with Disabilities Act, you may have to make some revisions in the schools to deal with those kids as they come back after the virus. You may have to make some accommodations with respect to the ease of hand washing frequently, but we're not selling out the country just because the United Teachers of Los Angeles asked us to do that. We'll come back to this because this is a crazy, and yet why I think this story is so important. It's not just crazy because what they're asking is crazy, but it's deeply, deeply troubling because they think that this is legitimate. They think this kind of conversation belongs in America. They think the teachers in Los Angeles are going to tell America that we're going to overthrow our freedom, our system of governance, our healthcare freedom for everybody, just because they've made a demand and they are after all the teachers of Los Angeles. It's a huge window on the audacity of the left and the astonishing emboldenment, if that's a word, the emboldening of the American left under this 8 years of Obama plus 3 years under Trump, where you have the left going apoplectic over everything he does.